Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you were able to enjoy, attend, and participate in many of the afternoon panels, which covered a variety of topics. We hope that they were very interesting to you and you had some thought-provoking discussion. As our CyCon US program comes to a close, it is now my privilege and honor to introduce our first keynote speaker for the afternoon, United States Senator for New Mexico, Senator Martin Heinrich. He serves on the Senate Armed Services and Intelligence Committees and is ranking member of the Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities. After completing a Bachelor's of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering at the University of Missouri, Senator Heinrich and his wife Julie moved to Albuquerque, where he began his career as a contractor working on directed energy technology at Phillips Laboratories, which is now the Air Force Research Laboratory at Kirkland Air Force Base. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Senator Martin Heinrich. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for inviting me to share a few words on the state of our cyber policy and strategy and the steps that I think we have to take to make our nation more prepared for the very real threats that we all face today. As a member of both the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Intelligence Committee, I have a unique privilege of engaging in cyber policy with the leading strategists and decision makers in the intelligence community and in our military. And before I get started, I just want to say a thank you to each of you here for what you're doing to make our nation safer in the face of new and extremely difficult challenges posed by cyber threats. Successfully thwarting cyber attacks or taking proper precautions never earns headlines, and it rarely, if ever, receives due recognition. So I'd like to say how grateful I am for what we're already doing now to take seriously the cyber threats that we face. But I think we can all agree that we are not doing even close enough to address this threat. High-profile cyber attacks and information warfare campaigns in recent years, from the Sony, OPM, and Equifax hacks to the Russian government's interference in last year's presidential election, have exposed a myriad of vulnerabilities in both our government and in our private sector. The lack of clear and strong responses to these attacks, even once we knew well who was to blame, sent a message not of deterrence, but of open invitation to foreign adversaries and malicious cyber actors to keep attacking us. In fact, as you all likely know, it's been reported that the same Russian military intelligence operatives responsible for last year's DNC hack targeted attendees of this very conference with a weaponized phony invitation infected with malware. Our increased reliance on the internet in the digital age has created new threats and vulnerabilities to our nation's infrastructure and even to human life. Critical infrastructure such as the electric grid, oil and gas pipelines, air traffic control, and financial institutions all use the internet and can be manipulated, disrupted, and in some cases, even destroyed. And as we witnessed over the course of last year's election, the democratic institutions responsible for protecting Americans' ability to choose our own elected leaders are vulnerable to cyber attacks, and for that matter, disinformation campaigns. And that is to say nothing about the new threats and tools our military and intelligence agencies must adapt to in cyber warfare that play a new and much more ambiguous set of rules than conventional warfare. The future of warfare is moving further and further away from the battlefield and closer to the machines and the networks and the devices that everyday citizens have all become so dependent on to make their daily lives simply function. In this new paradigm, determining and implementing the right approach has proven to be easier said than done. I think it's safe to say that despite good intentions in the Congress and the executive branch, after 8 years of the Obama administration and 1 year into the Trump administration, we have failed to formulate, to implement, and to declare a comprehensive cyber doctrine with the necessary sense of urgency. This slow walking in the face of such a serious threat was unfortunately on display as recently as a few weeks ago when we held a hearing in the Senate Armed Services Committee. The White House refused to have its top cybersecurity official testify as the committee examined our country's defenses against cyber attacks. And the officials from the administration who did come presented us with an illustration of our federal cyber policy that was dated from January of 2013. A lot has happened in 5 years. I fear, and I think it is a widely held view among both Republicans and Democrats on our committee, that episode spoke volumes about our nation's overall lack of preparedness in this field. And it's not that we don't have the right tools and resources. It's not that we don't have some of our best and brightest minds in our military, at our national laboratories, and in our intelligence and national security agencies working to protect us. We have simply lacked a strong cyber doctrine that sends a clear message to anyone who wants to attack us that they will be found out and that they will actually face consequences. President Trump has repeatedly argued that ambiguity and unpredictability surrounding our responses to all of our national security issues is a good thing. And frankly, that approach is not all that different from the Obama administration's repeated but vague threats that our responses to cyber attacks would be, quote, proportional, perhaps not visible, and at a time and place of our choosing, end quote. What deterrence value is there if our adversaries might not even be able to tell when or if we are going to retaliate? One of my good friends on the Armed Services Committee and the Intel Committee, Senator Angus King of Maine, often references the doomsday device in Dr. Strangelove as it applies to cybersecurity policy. What good are our cyber capabilities if no one knows they exist? It is imperative for the United States to communicate clearly to our adversaries the boundaries of what is acceptable in the cyber domain, and to make clear that we have offensive capabilities that should deter any hostile cyber activity that crosses those lines. Our frustration with a lack of a clear cyber deterrence policy led our committee to pass language in this year's defense bill calling for the Department of Defense to make known to our adversaries the existence of our cyber capabilities to demonstrate that any foreign power will face enormous costs if they attack us. A declaratory policy will tell our adversaries and allies alike that the United States has supreme offensive cyber capabilities, and frankly, that we are not afraid to use them. I have also worked in the Senate over the last few years to try to pass legislation to shore up cyber defenses for critical infrastructure, including our electrical grid, financial institutions, and state-run election systems. In fact, just last week, Senator Susan Collins and I introduced the Securing America's Voting Equipment Act to help states upgrade the physical, electronic, and administrative components of their voting systems. Our bill will require the Director of National Intelligence to work with state election officials to ensure that they have the appropriate information to protect their election systems from those security threats. But we must acknowledge that developing the best and most advanced cyber weapons and defenses will never be enough. Cyber warfare and the information warfare and foreign influence campaign we witnessed during the 2016 election was just the beginning of what will likely be the new normal. Our adversaries will not stop trying to infiltrate our institutions and conduct campaigns that benefit their interests. Vladimir Putin surely views last year's attack on our democracy as a resounding success for his interests. The Russians successfully used online tools and bots to target Americans' social media news feeds with propaganda and fake information. When the Russians selectively released hacked information, the American media reported on the contents of emails that they saw as basically salacious political gossip, instead of checking for attribution of how the content was stolen or telling the public about the deeper threat that hacking itself posed to our democratic process. And a large reason for that is because the government took too long, far too long, to react defensively, and hesitated for far too long to publicly attribute and forcefully retaliate to this attack on our democracy. Frankly, we took the bait, and the Russians caught us hook, line, and sinker. Americans as a whole now view our political process, our media, and our very democracy with more skepticism and more cynicism than they did before. And the president's efforts to cast doubt on our investigations and his utter lack of interest in learning how to prevent a future attack on our nation's democratic institutions make it all the more difficult to take the steps that we must take. But I remain determined to do all that we can to learn the truth of what we've done right and what we've done wrong, and to create policies that will prepare us for the very real threats that lie ahead. We all have a critical role to play in defending this country. Not only the federal government, not only the military and our national security agencies, but also the private sector and individuals. We need to educate and train the next generation of cybersecurity professionals and cyber warriors who will keep our institutions and our networks safe. And we must teach all Americans how to be diligent in protecting their private and their personal information. And most importantly, we need to educate the public about the landscape, particularly the media landscape that we now live in, so that they can learn to critically evaluate the information that we all read online and work alongside all of us to protect the integrity of our American institutions in a digital era. Thank you once again for all that each of you do and all that you're doing to take on this very complex and very difficult but vitally important effort. Thank you all very much for having me.